Good morning. The Northern Territory has recorded no new cases of COVID-19 overnight. The cluster remains at 3 cases, which is good news. Today, I can also reveal we know the source of the cluster, which is very good news. Case 3, the 21-year-old female I told you about yesterday, is now confirmed as the primary infection case. This led to the infection of the 26-year-old male index case. This means that by the strict definition of community transmission, there has been no community transmission that we know about. The Northern Territory remains community transmission free. Case 3 lied on her border entry form and has been issued an infringement notice following 5 hours of interviews with detectives over the past 24 hours. We now know that before arriving in Darwin, she spent time in Melbourne, which is almost certainly where she contracted the virus. The case flew from Cairns to Adelaide before driving to Melbourne on October 21 and spending 4 days in Victoria. She drove back to Adelaide on October 25, then flew back to Cairns, and then flew to Darwin on October 29. South Australian and Queensland officials are aware, and we will assist them in their inquiries. These actions have put the Territory at risk. They forced Katherine into lockdown and forced Katherine businesses to shut. While there were compassionate reasons for her decision to visit Victoria, there were not compassionate reasons for lying to the Territory and coming here from a hotspot. She's been issued a $5,024 fine, and she'll also pay for a $2,500 stay at Howard Springs. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Don't lie. Don't be selfish. Think of others. She will pay because she lied to officials. I want to be clear. If you have caught COVID, if you are a close contact and are required to go to the Centre for National Resilience, we will not be charging. It is a public health measure. Please do not hesitate on being tested for fear of pain at Howard Springs. Because of this individual, we are now expanding our investigation in Greater Darwin, and there are now additional exposure sites. I'll go through these shortly. So while it's great that we know where this outbreak came from and everything's looking good for Greater Darwin, we are going to have to expand the lockout by an additional 24 hours to allow us to do the contact tracing and testing work we need. So the Greater Darwin lockout has been extended till midnight tomorrow night. I'll run through the new exposure sites for Greater Darwin now. These are all casual contact sites. If you're at any of these sites, you need to test and isolate until you receive your negative result. These sites can change, so please keep checking coronavirus.nt.gov.au. Cotton on Casuarina, November 3, 4 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Harvest Press Juice, Darwin, November 3, 3:20 p.m. Delaney's Country and Western Store, November 3, 2:30 to 3 p.m. Coles Mitchell Street, Darwin, November 1, 3:20 to 3:35 p.m. Shenanigans, Darwin, October 31, 8:10 to 9:45 p.m. Tap Bar, Darwin, October 31, 8 p.m. to 9:12 p.m. Mindle Beach Casino, October 29, 7:30 p.m. to 9:20 p.m. Monsoons Nightclub has now been upgraded from a site of concern to an official exposure site, and there are 2 exposure windows. October 29 from 10 p.m. that night until 1:30 a.m. the following morning, and on October 31 from 7:30 p.m. to 8:50 p.m. We've also made Jetstar flight JQ920 from Cairns to Darwin on October 29 an exposure site, and there are 8 close contacts and 5 from that flight who remain in the Territory. 3 of those have been contacted and are isolating. Police are working to track down the remaining 2. As of now, there are 123 close contacts, 119 have been contacted and are isolated. Yesterday, there were about 2,600 tests done in total, and all of them were negative, which is a great sign. About 2,000 of those tests were in Greater Darwin, so thank you to everyone who came out and got tested. That gives us great confidence. As I said yesterday, all wastewater testing for Darwin up to November 3 was negative, aside from the catchment near the Centre for National Resilience at Howard Springs. So in summation, we are confident we're heading in the right direction in Darwin, and we'll be able to lift the lockout tomorrow at midnight, but we just need to keep smashing through our contact tracing and testing today. To Katherine, things all look good in all of the right areas. We've done over 500 tests in Katherine since the lockdown started, which is great, and no new positives. We have negative wastewater up to November 3. Because of this, we have made the decision that from 3 p.m. today, we will scale back from a lockdown in Katherine to a lockout. If all goes well, Katherine will then exit the lockout with Darwin at midnight tomorrow. The rules of the lockout in Katherine will be exactly the same as Darwin. If you're fully vaccinated, you can go about life as normal as long as you are masked. If you aren't fully vaccinated, you can only leave home for one of the 5 reasons. Schools will be open in Katherine tomorrow and all kids can attend. Unvaccinated parents can drop their kids at school, but do not go onto school grounds, please. All essential workers in Katherine, vaxxed or unvaxxed, can go to work. So everything's looking good. We're in a much better position than we were yesterday. We've had a donut day, no positives, and we now know the source of the infection. I'm confident that come midnight tomorrow, we can transition out of these lockouts. So keep doing what you're doing great. Yesterday, 2% of eligible Territorians got a jab or booked a jab. Almost 4,000 people were jabbed or booked. That is massive. There is capacity in our centres for anyone who wants to get the jab today. The vaccine is important, not just to save your life, but so we never have to lock down Katherine again, for example, so that you can fully participate in life, even when there are cases. This is the next phase of the response that we want to move to because it keeps you safe and it keeps you in a job. But we need to have a high vax rate to choose it. You need to be fully vaxxed to be able to do it. And we are absolutely at a place within our rollout where you've all had not just one chance, but multiple chances to get vaccinated. Our decision and your decisions are in your hands. Get vaccinated. I also want to address yesterday's rally. The behaviour that we witnessed yesterday, where people chose to confront and throw objects at our police during a lockout, when police resources are heavily tasked, was completely un-Territorian. I thank our police heroes for their professionalism and their restraint. They were difficult circumstances. You have my 100% support. I also thank the overwhelming majority of Territorians who are doing the right thing, staying safe and getting vaccinated. I also want to highlight the work of our contact tracers and put out a call to arms for you to help them. Right now, we are doing what's considered aggressive contact tracing. In New South Wales, Victoria, as cases rose, they shifted to baseline TTIQ, test, trace, isolate, quarantine. Exposure sites are posted and people who have checked in are messaged. The work of tracers has been made more difficult at some sites this week because people aren't checking in. Checking in may be what saves your life. Check in. You're doing it for yourself, not just for others. It's critical that you check in and you get that message and you know you've been to an exposure site and you get tested. Check in. Do it for yourself. Finally, I just want to give a shout out to our index case, not our case of origin. Because he got a test as soon as he experienced symptoms, we look like we've quickly run this outbreak down and can move on. His actions has saved lives. I think we should thank him for getting tested as soon as he got symptomatic. His next job is to get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you all for coming again. So things are looking a bit more optimistic today, but we have had to extend for 24 hours because of the exposure sites that have now come to light that we weren't aware of. and we will, if necessary, extend again if we need to. But as the Chief has said, we wouldn't be in this position of having early recognition of this cluster and of this outbreak if it hadn't been for that individual who came forward. So again, can I just reinforce that message? Please come forward if you have symptoms and get tested. I'd like to also give some recognition of the staff who, for nearly 2 years now, have been working so hard to protect the Territory. Those people under the command of the Territory Controller, the police, who have played a critical role, particularly in this last outbreak. Some of their detectives have revealed some very important information. Also, the contact tracers and our expert public health people. They've worked extraordinarily hard as they work round the clock, hour after hour, and I'd like to extend my particular thanks to them. All of those staff who stand up testing sites, all of those staff who are running the vaccination centres. It is an extraordinary effort, dependent on a limited number of people with expertise and commitment. So that's my main message, to thank all of those people for the extraordinary work that they've done. Again, we are in a somewhat optimistic stage today. I'm very happy with that, but I have to warn people, do not get complacent, please. At this stage, we're still at a stage where we could have further cases, so keep a vigilance up, and please continue to cooperate with all of our efforts and the lockdown and the lockout. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Payne. I think it's important to note that hypervigilance is something that we need to maintain here at the moment. The trajectory is looking good, so please keep doing what the majority of you are doing so that we can move back into the freedoms that we do all ultimately enjoy. Yesterday was a pretty disgraceful day. There was a number of Territorians, if they even claim to be Territorians, that let us down. To every single person at that rally, some of you may have gone there with the intent of thinking you were just going to go on a peaceful demonstration. That was never the intent of a core group of those people. You should be ashamed that you associated yourself with those people, because the behaviours were endorsed by you because of your presence. We provided you ample information to make an informed decision in the best interests of the Territory. You ignored that. You made, yet again, a very selfish decision. 9 people were arrested yesterday. Police officers were injured. Police were not the antagonists. Police had communicated what was going on. There was a lockout in place, a lawful direction, and you blatantly chose to ignore it. We have your registration vehicle details. We have imagery of you in a public place without a mask. We know who you are, and you can expect a visit for the vast majority as we play catch up with the activities of yesterday. $5,024 fines will be the minimum for many of you. To the officers that were on the front line, you did the Territory very proud yesterday. I'm so disappointed that a very small number of the public chose to cause you harm. To the individuals that threw the liquid at the police officers, and we saw some imagery of that last night on the news, of people flicking liquid towards police, we're coming for you. Completely and utterly inappropriate behaviour, and goes to a clear premeditation as to your intent. To those arrested, my clear message to you is cease your behaviour. My resources have far better things to do than babysitting your poor behaviour and your poor choices. This is about protecting the lives of Northern Territory people. Yet again, our resources across the Northern Territory have swung in very quickly to mitigate the spread. And the evidence to date clearly demonstrates how effective we've been in that place. To the detectives that worked with our key case now yesterday, they were patient, they were diligent, they stayed the path on the search for the truth, and that individual now has faced the fine. Again, the lessons are, please cooperate at the very first instance, because every delay is a further delay of keeping the Northern Territory from getting back to the full normal movement each and every day should afford us. Do not try and thread the needle. Do not try and get around us. Be upfront and honest. But more importantly, do not come into the Northern Territory unless you have been completely truthful of where you've been before you choose to enter. Feedback we're also receiving, sadly, is that many shop owners and their staff are dealing with some people who are unvaccinated and are challenging them about denying their entry. That's on you. And again, it's very un-Territorian if you are going to impact on someone who's just simply trying to get through their livelihood to follow what's a lawful direction that's put in place for the safety of the Northern Territory. So have a long, hard look at yourselves. Let those people go about the course of their work. We've got a big focus ahead as we move now into the next phase. We've got to make sure that all of those people from the exposure sites that have been nominated today come forward and get testing. The testing facilities, particularly at Marara, are up and running, ready for you. For those in Katherine, please keep coming forward. Make sure you get a test if you're in any of those exposure sites so we can be far more informed this time tomorrow on our future steps. Again, to all of those who are putting their shoulder to the wheel, thank you. It's deeply appreciated.
Did yesterday take you and your resources by surprise? And what will you be doing this coming Friday to ensure this type of violent behaviour doesn't happen when the mandate comes into effect?
No, it didn't take us by surprise. I think you would be critically aware that we were quite open about the fact that we knew that there was going to be movements. We knew where people were going to go. Clearly, when you have groups of people to that number who try and make decisions on the run, we have to be adaptive, and we clearly demonstrated how adaptive we were. And the fact that we were able to pretty much mitigate the continuation of that event in a relatively short period of time should be noted as a successful operation. But again, this comes down to individual behaviour, and the behaviour is abhorrent and it shouldn't be tolerated, and I'm very confident the broader community of the Northern Territory finds it as reprehensible as I do.
Is there any indication what was in that liquid that was thrown at your officers?
We'll do some further work on that and we'll forensically analyse what it was. But certain, it's a case to say that the members who were affected felt that it was particularly hot and that it also had a bitter taste. It entered the mouth of a number of our officers and had an immediate effect of burning.
So the people who threw that liquid, what sort of charges did they face?
Serious ones.
As in?
Certainly aggravated assault.
Did you receive any reports from the public about people reporting individuals at the rally?
We were critically aware of a number of people who were there. There have been ones that have been associated to a number of rallies and other causes, so not necessarily purely one that related to the vaccination mandate. So we're very, very confident that we'll be able to round up a lot of those people and their identities will come to the fore as we continue to do our work.
You said you'd given those people ample information to make a choice about not going. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think most of the media pack here would know that I've been quite open and upfront about the expectations that were put in place. Repeatedly asked people to defer it so that their behaviours could be conducted in a lawful manner when the lockout provisions weren't in place. That was clearly ignored, and more to the point, the wearing or the lack of wearing of masks was a clear demonstration they simply thought they were above everybody.
What about the organisers? Will they be facing any penalties?
We'll continue to work with the organisers. Of course, you've got to balance the fact that some organisers are quite genuine in their passion and their belief of what they're trying to do, but others make individual decisions that take that pack away from what the broader intent was. So we'll work through who was and was not involved, particularly in the elements of premeditation, as it relates to the intent to assault my police officers.
Are you concerned the tactics will scale up ahead of the mandate coming into effect this coming weekend?
No, I think that would be a very idiotic thing to do.
Can people on Friday expect similar measures to yesterday, roadblocks going into the city and other measures by your law enforcement officers?
I think people can expect that we will continue to make sure that the amenity of the Northern Territory is safe, and that we'll make sure that people are complying with the laws of the land. Where we are on Friday may be a different point of view from where we are today as it relates to lockouts and the like, but again, we've got a long history of facilitating peaceful protests, but that one yesterday was in complete defiance of the Chief Health Officer directions and shouldn't be tolerated when balanced against the need to protect the Northern Territory.
What was that 21-year-old woman travelling to Darwin for, and how did she make it across 3 state borders to get into Darwin?
Well, she lied on the border form in the Northern Territory. I can't comment for South Australia and Queensland. I won't talk to the reason why she was in Victoria. That's her story, but the version of events we have, compassionate reasons to be in Victoria. I think we've publicly released her exposure sites in the territory, and I think you can make your own judgments about what she was doing in the Northern Territory off those exposure sites.
Can I just ask about your response to what we saw yesterday at those protest rallies?
I support what the Commissioner said completely. Peaceful, lawful protests have a strong history in the Northern Territory, as they do across the country. There was plenty of advice given about us being in a lockout situation in Darwin. Those lockout rules exist for a reason. It is to reduce harm on our community, reduce risk on our community for the spread of COVID. We want to see people safe. Yesterday, and the way the rally was conducted, put people at risk for the reasons why we have a lockout, and then the way that people engaged and were provocative put safety at risk too. So I think it's obvious from the images, it's obvious from what the Commissioner said, that clearly that was unacceptable, unlawful, provocative, unnecessary behaviour yesterday. We're looking like moving rapidly out of the lockout phase. If you want to protest, you can do that safely and peacefully very soon. But yesterday was obviously not a smart day, not a lawful day to have that rally.
Why is Katherine moving to a lockout when it hasn't hit that 80% double vax rate? I thought the whole point of that measure was that it could be done safely once everybody had been vaccinated.
That's why we went to the lockdown measure. So obviously we've always stepped out of lockdowns into something. In the past it's been lockdown into essentially a mask mandate, etc. What we can now do is step down out of a lockdown into a lockout, and then obviously there'll be a mask measure again. So this is a step out process. So we're able to do this because we had the lockdown. I agree with you. We couldn't choose a lockout option for Katherine up front because of their vax rate. But now that we've done these tests, now we know where we're at, we feel confident we can step down from lockdown to lockout. So that's a measure we have available to us now, and we're choosing to take it.
Thank you, Ron.
Did everyone manage to get started before we actually started going?
Yeah, just.